Will Smith could have been Neo, and the Matrix wasn't supposed to be a prison for human energy. It was meant to use our brains as powerful processors. The Matrix almost became a completely different movie, shaped by wild changes that altered everything from the story's core themes to its iconic casting. How did all these choices transform The Matrix into the groundbreaking film we know today? Let's break down the twists and turns that shaped this sci-fi classic. The original vision for The Matrix was almost a different reality entirely. In the original script, humans weren't used as energy sources. Instead, their brains powered the machines as computing engines. The concept was far more disturbing. Human minds working every day and night to make the machines smarter. But somewhere along the way, this idea was dropped, and the more familiar battery metaphor was adopted. We still don't know the exact reason for this change, but it fundamentally altered the story's direction. Neo was always Thomas Anderson, the programmer we met in the original film. But the tone of his journey was harsher, without much room for hope. Morpheus, the powerful leader who mentors Neo, was initially called Brown, a name that doesn't quite carry the same weight. Then there was the ending. In the initial version, Neo dies in his final battle, but humanity manages to win the war against the machines. The studio decided this was too grim and pushed for a more uplifting conclusion. This led to the iconic ending where Neo survives, paving the way for sequels and leaving the story open for more. One of the most fascinating concepts was the visual of humans as processors linked together to fuel AI development. This would have created an entirely different look for the Matrix, with rows of people and minds running calculations endlessly. If you think about it, the Matrix might have had to distract humans with endless simulations to keep them busy, a vision of society working non-stop, lost in virtual reality. The Wachowskis had a specific vision for how the Matrix would begin, and it didn't always look the way it does now. Originally, the plan for the opening scene was more straightforward, giving the audience a clear sense of who to root for right from the start. But as they refined their ideas, they decided that making things ambiguous would create a far more engaging experience. Lily Wachowski, one of the film's co-creators, wanted viewers to feel completely disoriented. The idea was to introduce the story in a way that left everyone confused about who was on which side. When the film opens, with Trinity sitting alone in the dark hotel room, it's unclear whether she's the hero, the villain, or something else entirely. And when it comes to casting, what if I told you that The Matrix could have had an entirely different leading man? Keanu Reeves as Neo feels so iconic now that it's almost unthinkable to imagine anyone else in the role. But back when The Matrix was being cast, Keanu wasn't the first choice. One of the most famous what could have been stories involves Will Smith. He was offered the role but turned it down to star in Wild Wild West. Years later, Smith admitted that he didn't quite grasp the concept when the Wachowskis pitched it to him, and looking back, he had no regrets. And the list of actors considered for the role is long and filled with famous names such as Johnny Depp, Brad Pitt, Val Kilmer, Ewan McGregor, David Duchovny, and even Nicolas Cage. The casting of Trinity, the fierce and skilled hacker who helps guide Neo through the mysteries of the Matrix, also had some surprising contenders. Before Carrie-Anne Moss, who was relatively unknown at the time, landed the role, the filmmakers considered big stars like Sandra Bullock, Janet Jackson, Michelle Yeoh, Gillian Anderson, and even Madonna. Each of these actresses had their own star power and unique appeal, but Moss ultimately brought an understated intensity that became important to Trinity's character. Moss herself never thought she'd land such a role. She assumed the part of Trinity would go to a name in Hollywood. "It was just another audition that I was going on in between my life," she once said. But after reading her scenes, the filmmakers asked her to punch and kick a punching bag. When she left, she could hear them cheering in the other room. But Moss's casting was just one surprising choice. The Wachowskis had even bigger twists in mind. The Wachowskis originally envisioned The Matrix using a more traditional cyberpunk approach, where cyberspace existed as a distinct digital world separate from reality. But they saw a major issue. Cyberspace as a concept felt abstract and lacked context, making it difficult for audiences to connect with the story's deeper ideas about reality and simulation. So in the final version, instead of resenting cyberspace as the alternate world, they flipped the concept entirely. everyday life, the familiar, ordinary world, became the illusion, while the hidden, digital reality of the Matrix was made to feel real. The inversion allowed the metaphors about simulation, control, and the blurred lines between truth and illusion to work seamlessly within the story. The famous goo pod scene in The Matrix went through a lot of trial and error before it turned out the way we see it on screen. In the original plan, the goo wasn't something anyone thought much about, but as filming got underway, the practical effects team realized just how complicated it would be to make everything look realistic. The goo had to have the right consistency, and the skin on top had to tear apart believably as Neo emerged. Then there were the prosthetics that needed to pop convincingly from his body to add the illusion. But there was an unexpected problem. The goo was freezing cold. Early testers who had to sit in for even short periods ended up with hypothermia. By the time it was Keanu Reeves' turn to get into the pod, the team had learned that the goo needed to be heated. But it took a lot of testing, and some near disasters to figure it out. In the end, this attention to detail and all the behind-the-scenes effort paid off, creating one of the film's most unforgettable and unsettling sequences. One of the most intriguing original ideas for The Matrix involved the character Switch. In the early concept, Switch was meant to represent a bold exploration of gender identity. The plan was for Switch to appear as a woman in The Matrix, but be a man in the real world. This detail was designed to play into the film's themes of fluidity and the way our perception of reality can shift. But that idea got cut. The filmmakers felt it might be too confusing for audiences, so it didn't make it to the final version. Lawrence Fishburne, who played Morpheus, also added an interesting layer to his character. In the real world, he gave Morpheus a more gentle, nurturing energy, almost leaning into a feminine side. But inside the Matrix, Morpheus transformed into a powerful, traditionally masculine leader. This duality was subtle but added depth to his role, reflecting how identity can change depending on the environment. The filmmakers wanted to emphasize just how harsh and unwelcoming the real world was. During the scene with the Sentinels, the original vision was for the actor's breath to fog up the ship's glass, showing how freezing cold it was inside. Director of photography Bill Pope explained that because the sun had been blotted out, the world of the real should feel icy and unforgiving. And when the power dies on the Nebuchadnezzar, things would get even colder. Despite their best efforts, they never managed to get the breath effect quite right on camera. The idea was supposed to make viewers feel the chill and reinforce the harshness of a world where sunlight no longer warmed the planet. And the real world of The Matrix was supposed to feel much colder, literally. The Oracle scene in The Matrix went through some major cuts during editing. Initially, this part of the film, where Morpheus brings Neo to meet the Oracle, was much longer and filled with extra exposition. According to editor Zack Steinberg, the filmmakers were concerned that the pacing might drag, slowing down the momentum of the movie. One scene that was completely cut involved a roughly 2-minute conversation between Morpheus and Neo in the hallway before they met the Oracle. Steinberg mentioned that this conversation was beautifully written and acted, adding depth to their characters and the film's philosophical themes. It was a moment that he personally enjoyed, but ultimately, it didn't serve the film's pacing at that point in the story. Keeping it would have disrupted the tight, fast-moving narrative that The Matrix is known for. And finally, what if the ending of The Matrix had delivered a typical Hollywood-style showdown instead of a thought-provoking twist? When the Wachowskis were developing The Matrix, the original ending faced a lot of pushback. People who read the script kept suggesting a more traditional, blockbuster-style resolution. They wanted The Matrix itself destroyed, envisioning an explosive finale where the evil force was taken down like a massive Death Star moment. It's the kind of ending audiences are used to, where everything wraps up neatly and the villains are defeated. But Lana Wachowski and the rest of the team had a different vision. They felt that the real payoff of the story should come from Neo's journey, not from destroying the Matrix. Instead of focusing on a grand external victory, they wanted the climax to be Neo's internal transformation. The idea was to make his awakening and realization of his own power the highlight of the story, leaving the resolution open and hinting at more to come. Even though it was a struggle to convince others that this direction was the right one, it ultimately paid off, setting The Matrix apart and leaving a lasting impact on its audience. Thanks for watching! If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe to Tinseltown Unscripted for more content like this.